Hello and welcome to this video on Reading 2 in the CFA Level 1 curriculum. Just a heads up, this reading is over 150 pages long, so the material will be covered in parts. Once again, I'm going to start with a disclaimer. CFA Institute does not endorse what I'm doing, and a lot of the content is borrowed from the CFA Institute's website and resource material. In the last reading, we learned about the code and the 7 standards. In this reading, we'll take a deeper dive into the standards themselves. Hope you've had a chance to review the 2-pager that gives a summary of each standard and its subcomponents. If not, it's in the description, and I encourage you to review that before watching this video. You can also access this reading and the 3 others in Study Session 1 on CFAI's website in the link below in the description. With that, let's continue. So there are 3 learning outcome statements in this reading. First one, to demonstrate the application of code of ethics and standards of professional conduct to situations involving issues of professional integrity. B, to distinguish between conduct that conforms to the code and standards and conduct that violates the code and standards. And finally, to recommend practices and procedures designed to prevent violations of the code of ethics and standards of professional conduct. Now, we won't be getting too much into the situations. That's all the examples that you'll see. The way the reading is set up is that each of the standards has guidance and recommendations followed by several examples to get you familiar with ethical dilemmas that might come up from time to time and develop a framework to tackle them. Now, I strongly encourage you to complete this reading on your own. Ethics is very important at all 3 levels, and you want to make sure that you do well. Certain readings you can get away with by just looking at your notes and videos, but consensus is ethics is one topic area that you want to study from the curriculum. Also, there are about 40 questions at the end of the chapter, so you want to make sure you do them all and you understand them well. We're going to look at each standard along with guidance and recommendations. So let's start with a recap. So here are the 7 standards that were mentioned in reading 1. We're going to begin with professionalism, and this part we're going to cover standards 1 and 2. So the first one is 1A is knowledge of the law. Here are the highlights and recommendations. Highlights are first bullet, relationship between the code and standards and applicable law. The CFA Institute says follow the stricter law. Whenever there are any differences in the law, if rules are lax in the country where you're doing business and less strict than the code and standards, then follow the code and standards. Second thing, participation in or association with violations by others. The short answer here is don't do this knowingly. As soon as you become aware, you have to dissociate from the activity to be in compliance with CFA code and standards. Also, it's not a smart move to plead ignorance when there's an expectation to know the law. Some of you might be thinking, do you need to report? The curriculum says you're not required to report the violation, but it may be prudent to do so. Now, moving on to investment products and applicable laws. In short, the CFA Institute simply says to know the laws where you're originating these investment products and where you're going to be selling them. There is an exhibit in this reading. It's called Exhibit 1. It's related to the first bullet point. I just encourage you to look over it and understand it. It might be helpful on exam day. So the recommendations that the curriculum offers for individuals are to stay informed with the help of the legal department and continuing education, to review procedures and maintain current files. For firms, they say develop code of ethics, provide information on applicable laws to employees, and have protocols for reporting violations. Now, there's a tip here at the bottom to look over the examples related to the standard. This one applies to almost all the standards. I'm not going to repeat it, just be mindful that these examples are here for you to look at and become familiar with the situations. Moving along, 1B is independence and objectivity. The highlights here are buy-side clients. Starts out with, so there's a threat. There might be a perceived threat of reprisal from portfolio managers, and that can affect the sell-side analysts' objectivity and independence. So the curriculum just wants you to be aware. You want to generally avoid situations that could actually cause someone to perceive that you're not being objective and independent in your advice. Fund managers and custodial relationships, just be cautious when attending educational and marketing events. Don't take any gifts. The curriculum says modest gifts are okay, but as a general rule, just be careful when you're accepting gifts from clients. Investment banking relationships, the best practice here is for the firms to build firewalls between research and banking. Performance measurement and attribution. Performance analysts may look at a portfolio manager's performance and see that they're straying from their mandate, but if they comment on that, they might get into troubles from their senior leadership. So just a matter of staying objective and not being afraid to bring up anything that might taint your independence and objectivity. For public companies, there is pressure from companies to issue favorable reports. The best practice here is to create restricted lists. And what that really is, so when a company is on a restricted list, only factual information is disseminated if there is some negative opinion about the company. And credit rating agency opinions, similar to investment banking relationships, just need to build firewalls and protections. Influence during manager selection and procurement process. Don't solicit gifts and compensation of any kind. What that means, not only personal, but outside of that as well. So you can't tell them to donate to your favorite charity or get into a pay-to-play scheme. And that's covered more in the curriculum. Just take a look. Issuer paid research. Analysts must separate facts from opinions in their reports. And travel funding. Here the curriculum says if the company is the only option, take their services, but only moderately. Otherwise, just pay for yourself and arrange your own travel. Recommendations here are to protect integrity of opinions, create restricted lists, restrict special cost arrangements, limit gifts, restrict investments, review procedures, independence policy, and appoint a senior officer for compliance. Moving along. 1C is misrepresentation. Here, there could be an impact on investment practice. So what that means is don't misrepresent employee firm qualifications, employee firm performance record, or investment characteristics. At least don't do so knowingly. Don't guarantee any specific returns, such as 10% on volatile investments. The curriculum does state that, though it's okay to provide clients information on investments with guarantees built into the structure, or if the institution promoting an investment product agrees to cover losses. But generally, you shouldn't guarantee any returns. You use appropriate benchmarks when applicable to performance reporting, improves consistency of reported prices and information. Social media, anonymous misrepresentations on social media are covered under this standard and could be a violation. Omissions, don't omit material information. Have strict policies for composites to avoid cherry picking. Plagiarism, this is probably a bigger one in this particular standard. Just common sense, don't plagiarize, give credit where due, cite sources in your reports. Work completed for employer, here the curriculum says it's the firm's property. Firm can do whatever they want with the employee's work. But they can't reissue the same report with another employee's name. That's wrong. Recommendations here are to give factual information, prepare summary of employee qualifications, verify third-party information when citing client material, and maintain up-to-date web pages. Plagiarism policy is to maintain copies of work, attribute quotations, and attribute summaries. 1Z is misconduct. Highlights here are, this is a broad standard covering conduct that reflects poorly on professional integrity, good reputation, or competence of members and candidates. Could be lying, cheating, stealing. Alcohol abuse during work is a violation if it interferes with your ability to fulfill your professional responsibilities. Personal bankruptcy may not be a violation. Just look at the surrounding circumstances. Legal transgressions from nonviolent protest, civil disobedience are not necessarily violations under this standard, and you can't frivolously seek enforcement of every little detail of code and standards for personal gain. Could be misconduct. Recommendations here are candidates members should encourage firms to have policies and procedures surrounding the code of ethics, list of violations, and employee references. So just to have some sort of background checks to be cautious. 2A is material non-public information. Now, some of the highlights here or focus points are what is material information? Information that can impact prices. Reasonable investors may want to know this information. What constitutes non-public information? Not widely disseminated to the general public. A room full of analysts, you're telling them something is not considered public dissemination. The big point here is mosaic theory. It is legal and it's in fact encouraged. Build mosaics based on public and non-material, non-public information. That's completely fine. Just retain records if you're doing so. And when you're doing so, social media, it's okay to use social media to talk to investors and clients without conflicting with the standard. Using industry experts, just make sure experts are not crossing the boundary and revealing confidential and protected information. Investment research reports don't have to be made public if the analyst doesn't want to make them public. It's a reward for the analyst's hard work, and if investors want to see them, they should become the analyst's client, is what the curriculum suggests. You can read through the recommendations, quite a few. The bolded ones are the ones I felt were important, but still doesn't mean the other ones are less important. Just read it in the curriculum. And finally, 2B is market manipulation. There is two types of manipulation: information-based and transaction-based. Don't want to do this. It's a violation. Liquidity pumping strategy, though, must be disclosed for it to be okay and not a violation, especially for market making activities. And the intent of the action is critical when determining whether there's a violation or not. And once again, just look at the examples. This is the end of part 1, and we've covered about 1/3 of the material in this reading so far. So with that, I'm going to close this off, and we'll see you in part 2. Thanks.